If you're a roller coaster enthusiast with enough credits, I'm sure you've had some pretty bad experiences on some rides, and I am no exception. If you've been watching my channel for a while, then you'll know that I'm no stranger to hating on some certain roller coasters. But today, I am narrowing it down to my 10 least favorite non-kiddie rides out of my entire credit list. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting us off at number 10 is Wild Mouse at Hershey Park. This is your standard Mock Rides Wild Mouse coaster, but for some reason, this ride specifically just felt like an even more janky, bumpy, and awkward version of the other Mock Wild Mouses. Not to mention that it was a pretty forgettable ride experience. All Wild Mouses aren't the most spectacular rides in the world, but this one especially just completely left my mind after riding. Coming up next at number 9 is yet another Wild Mouse. It's Twist and Shout at Family Kingdom. If you thought that Wild Mouse at Hershey Park was janky, Twist and Shout was even jankier. Family Kingdom is a small amusement park that could honestly pass as a charming county fair, and Twist and Shout is exactly the type of ride that you would expect to be there. The cars are very small and cramped, and the ride itself is pretty janky. Similarly to the previous coaster on this list, it's as forgettable as it gets. Putting a spin on the classic Wild Mouse comes in at number 8, and that is Galaxy Spin at Fun Spot Kissimmee. Get it? I have motion sickness, and despite the name, the ride did not spin, which I am personally super thankful for. However, the ride itself was pretty boring, and, similarly to the previous two entries on the list, forgettable. Yes, it had some decent laterals, but other than that, there was absolutely nothing else to this ride. Okay, I promise that we're done with Wild Mouses now, because number 7 is Canyon Blaster at Six Flags Great Escape. It is such a shame that this ride is here, because I firmly believe that if this ride were longer and had some more better elements, then it would be one of my favorite aero coasters. However, since it is such a short ride, I did have to rank it this low. I mean, it's barely 2,000 feet long. A slightly worse aero mine train is coming in at number 6, and it's Cedar Creek Mine Ride at Cedar Point. This was my second ever quote-unquote big roller coaster, and man is it janky. The aero transitions rattle my brain every time. The only really good part of this coaster is the final helix, and even that feels janky and slightly uncomfortable. Other than the kiddie coasters, this is the worst coaster at Cedar Point, and I would absolutely love to see the park replace it with a B&M Flyer, or a Mock Extreme Spinner, or a GCI Woody, or... you know what? Anything would be better than this. Number 5 disappointed me so much, and that is the Bat at Canada's Wonderland. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, back in 2022, I rode both Invertigo and Flashback, which are both Vekoma boomerangs, and I loved both of them, contrary to popular reception of this coaster model. So when I was in line for the Bat, I was looking forward to a ride experience similar to Flashback, but man, this experience was so much more rough, painful, and jerky. After riding, I even felt a little nauseous, so I would definitely not recommend this ride. Number 4 is where the coasters start to get really bad. So far, Thunderhawk at Michigan's Adventure is my first and only Vekoma SLC, and man, this ride is atrocious. In short, the restraints come way too close to your head, the track is way too rough, the transitions are way too janky, and the entire ride is just way too awful. I wasn't expecting it to be as bad as it was, but man, I would say never again, but if I had to ride another SLC for the credit, I guess I would do it. Either way though, I hated this ride, and I am sure that I will never ride this specific coaster ever again. Number 3 is the worst steel coaster I've ever ridden, and that is Steamin' Demon at Six Flags Great Escape. On paper, this is a pretty standard aero looper, but when you actually ride it, man, the restraints, mixed with some of the roughest, most awkward transitions and inversions, make for one of the worst roller coasters in the world. Thankfully, this is a pretty short ride, but I genuinely think that this could be the worst coaster on this list if it were 1 or 2 elements longer. Great Escape just got a new investment in Bobcat, which replaced Alpine bobsleds, and now I'm just counting down the days until Steamin' Demon is replaced with something much, much better. Our runner-up for the worst roller coaster in the world is Hurler at Carowinds. This roller coaster does absolutely nothing, along with being a super rough ride. I had the pleasure of being assigned to a wheel seat near the back, so that means that I got jackhammered the entire time. With any roller coaster, you hope that you get to experience at least one moment that stands out above the rest. I mean, some of the coasters previously on this list had an element like that, but Hurler had absolutely nothing in its entire layout and was super rough. So for those two major reasons, it's the second worst roller coaster of all time. And finally, coming in at number 1 is Mighty Canadian Mindbuster at Canada's Wonderland. Are any of you guys really surprised? The nickname Spinebuster very much lived up to my experience. This was one of the roughest roller coasters I had ever ridden, and I was crushed up next to some random guy who was with his friends, and they were all laughing like that one surfer dude from SpongeBob. Even with the roughness, I thought that I would be able to slightly excuse it, like Mindblower, because of its layout. But even this coaster somehow managed to have absolutely nothing in it, just like Hurler. No airtime, barely any laterals, and all jank. 0 out of 10, never again. So those were the 10 worst non-kiddie coasters that I've ridden, and I do not recommend riding any of these roller coasters unless you're a credit-hungry enthusiast like me. I'm not sure if this list will change before the end of the 2024 season, but for now, this is the definitive ranking. What are the worst roller coasters you have ridden? Comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.
I'm so excited.
Ready to go inside?
Yeah.
Let's do it. What do you think?
It's so preppy in here.
Is it just as preppy as you imagined?
Yes.